Britain's housing crisis is getting worse every year. Young people cannot afford to buy, rents are spiralling, and families are being priced out of the areas they grew up in. Politicians keep saying the problem is not enough houses are being built, including someone like Angela Rayner dodging around the question. But they're also deliberately ignoring the main driver: record levels of mass immigration. Today, we're cutting through all of Labour's lies. For years, the establishment has claimed that Britain's housing shortage is purely a supply problem, while building more homes is necessary. This explanation deliberately hides the real issue. Net migration has been running at extremely high levels, adding hundreds of thousands of people annually who all need somewhere to live. In today's video, we're looking at how mass immigration has become the biggest single factor making housing unaffordable, and how Labour's current policies and corruption are making the problem even worse. Every year, net migration adds hundreds of thousands of new residents to Britain. Each of these people need housing, especially the ones that come off the boats and also the ones that come off planes legally. When you combine this with low house building rates over the past decade, the result is obvious. Demand massively outstrips supply. Yet politicians and the media outlets continue to pretend immigration has little to no impact on housing. This is dishonest and easily disproven by basic supply and demand. Yet it remains the dominant narrative pushed by those in power. Under current Labour's government, there has been a clear push to fast-track housing and accommodation for asylum seekers and migrants while British families remain on long waiting lists. Hotels and properties are being used to house newcomers at significant public expense, especially to do with ones that have been also going near schoolyards and even school children, also trying to grape them or even do something and also try to essay them. At the same time, Labour's approach is riddled with corruption and cronyism, with contracts and resources often going to connected individuals and organisations rather than being used to genuinely solve the housing shortage for British citizens. This creates a direct competition for limited housing stock and fuels resentment among ordinary people who feel they are being pushed back to the queue of their own country. Labour promised to fix the housing crisis and help working people get on the property ladder. Instead, they continue to blame not enough houses being built, while maintaining high immigration levels and prioritising accommodation for migrants. This is a clear contradiction. They cannot claim to be helping British families while actively increasing demand through mass immigration and giving preferential treatment to newcomers, including trying to pave over something like with green belt land. Even if genuine patriots were to take control and begin fixing the country, figures like Keir Starmer would likely escape accountability, slipping away in a helicopter with open arms to a comfortable position in Northern Ireland government or similar safe havens, as I talked about in the previous video, and including with people like enqiure patriots want to solve this when the Prime Minister, like I said, could easily slip away. These lies and contradictions are becoming harder to hide as the housing situation deteriorates and more people experience the consequences firsthand. While ordinary British families are being priced out of the housing, vast tracts of greenbelt land are being earmarked for data centres. These facilities are not being built to serve the public good. They're not being built to try to make ambulance times, even though that has nothing to do with data centres, as they try to say that it would do, or even make sure that grandma, like they would in lockdowns, got to take your vax to try and protect grandma, the same way that you got to build data centres to try and protect grandma if she has a nasty fall. They're a part of a growing infrastructure for mass data collection, artificial intelligence and surveillance. Labour is allowing this to happen with little resistance, even as they claim to care about the environment and try to protect green spaces. The destruction of the green belt land and for these projects shows where their real priorities lie. Not with the British people or the countryside, or even protecting farmers, as what happened when the inheritance tax, including someone like with Jeremy Clarkson from the Top Gear cast, even talked out and even called out, and even managed to successfully win against someone like Keir Starmer, and be very, very pro-British and very pro-land. Though he has included his support for reform and, in quote, trying to protect farmers, I do think that Clarkson does care enough to even protect something like with the countryside. But with building the technological backbone of a civil state, their priorities are not with the British people or even the countryside, but with building the technological backbone of a surveillance state. With many countries across the globe trying to build these surveillance states that use mass amounts of water, essentially it's kind of like that film Oblivion. Oblivion stars Tom Cruise, where the film or the main plot was about this alien race coming down to Earth, extracting the resources include mass amounts of water, and being able to suck all of it up in order to power its AI through its essentially these big massive blocks of metal in order for the AI to work. Because if people didn't know this, a lot of these surveillance centres are basically being built in order to suck up all of the water, because a lot of people don't know this. Like, for example, in America, there have been reports of people not being able to access water because it's all being sucked up by all of these data centres that need it in order to cool the AI system. What's even more telling is that figures like Nigel Farage and Rupert Lowe have been almost completely silent on this issue. Reform UK has made noise about immigration and housing problem in general terms, but they have said very little about the quiet paving over green belt land for data centres and AI infrastructure. This is yet another example of controlled opposition. They will talk about a certain issue that helps them to promote them, including like with the grooming gangs inquiry, which is not just also to do about with the whole white girls being, in quote, great, even though there is evidence of this, but also to do with even Sikh and even Pakistani women being involved in these crimes. And also to do with how the system has basically failed these girls, including not offering proper support, and especially these conservative type people or even Tory Zionists using Grape gang victims in order to try and promote their party in order to have their own interests, which is completely and utterly disgusting. They will talk about certain issues that are safe or popular, but they avoid subjects that point to deeper systems of control and long-term replacement of the British way of life, not just through immigration, but also to even something like on a conspiratorial level, like we do with chemtrails, what they're putting in our food, and also to do with AI centres being built in order to spy on us even quicker. With all this data being collected through cameras and all of it being sent right back to them in order to create the surveillance state, the same people who claim to be fighting for Britain are happy to stay quiet while the country is being transformed both demographically and technologically. The housing crisis isn't just an accident or just by bad planning, it's also been encouraged by all of these globalists and is the direct result of mass immigration, with the political cowardice, corruption and dishonesty. Until these politicians are willing to reduce immigration to sustainable levels and stop prioritising migrants over British citizens, no amount of house building will solve the problem for ordinary people. So anyway guys, hope you enjoyed this video about me talking about to do with the housing crisis, and also a combination with to do with the not just the housing crisis, but also to do with these AI data centers. And it's kind of like a combination of them being built, them being used to spy on people, and the fact that they're not even hiding it anymore, including after when a lot of people woke up, maybe even something even previously before COVID, such as 9/11, but it's getting to the point now, like I said, where people are not ignoring this, why they want to build these centres on greenbelt land. And when it comes down to someone like with Nigel Farage and basically them using grooming gang victims in order for them to be protected. Now, apparently, according to a video that I actually watched recently, which was this woman, and she talked about the grooming gang victims, she talked about some of these grooming gang victims not actually being heard. Now, obviously, a lot of these women is going to be very sensitive for them. In fact, apparently some people have actually self-oathed themselves because they've had to relive this, they've had to go over the details and the horrible, horrible stuff that's happened to them. But that's the thing, when it comes down to the white side of this, where they say that all these people were just white grooming gang victims, it wasn't actually a part of this. It's also to do with kind of the controlled opposition on the right, where they will only talk about this specific issue. And apparently, according to this woman, some of the people that went with the narrative, for example, there was apparently Sikh, and there was also a Muslim woman that were even involved in these grooming gangs. And the problem is, apparently they've been ignored, and someone said that someone like Lowe actually even turned away one of the victims, and they didn't even set up proper systems in order to enact this properly. And you start to see this narrative come in with the state where, they'll say some base stuff with a grooming gang inquiry, which, by the way, went nowhere, because the thing that frustrates me about this grooming gang inquiry that, in quote, Lur's done, or even someone like Reform tried to do, and, they're not doing this, or Restore aren't doing this, or Nigel isn't, or whatever. You see this bullshit back and forth where it comes to do with them just virtue signaling, and to be honest, when I looked into this inquiry, it basically didn't achieve anything. We didn't find out anything new, we didn't listen to the victims, we didn't have the evidence or the recording, and have these victims come forward in a controlled manner, or even offer support. And what's ended up happening is that this has basically just gone nowhere, and it just feels like a publicity stunt. And it feels completely and utterly disgusting that the fact that this has happened, and the fact that, no, we didn't learn anything new, and as well, these politicians, which, by the way, the Conservatives have some power, they actually did win some type of power so they can easily investigate this, but they didn't. And because of this, it's just disgusting to use these people, all these grooming gang victims, in order for political gain, as I said earlier. And because of this, they will also not talk about something like with data centres. And there's all these data centres that are being, in quote, open up in the UK, and they're not even had anymore. And the reason why they want to create these data centres is, in quote, to try to get grandma to be quicker ambulance times, when that has nothing to do with AI. And if you didn't know how large language models work, they're basically just processing data. You give it processes the data, and then gives an output, both input and output throughout data. And when it comes down to these centres being built, it is just more for surveillance. And they always say that, it's to, in quote, to try and protect grandma, but that's the thing, that the whole point of communication is to do with the call centres that have all these police people in, and it's more to do with a type of policing or response time. Like things like, for example, encouraging people to report crimes or someone that's been injured. Usually people do get there on time, but the problem is that I've experienced is that the NHS is basically so woke, and it has this dialect of what you can and can't say with some of these nurses, can't express their opinions, things like that. And even someone like the Lament podcast, when he was a nurse during lockdown, he basically just walked out when he didn't want to take the COVID vax. And because of this, you see all of this tie-in where people are not doing mass non-compliance, but you see all these people that are supposed to be base and not control opposition, but then they never talk about the serious issues, including like these data centres. And the reason why I'm repeating myself so much is because that a lot of these people who are useless lemmings just want to basically bandwagon on these people that want to, in quote, protect you, when in reality they're actually not. Plus all of the water that all of these data centers need, because they need for the cooling fans. So essentially computers need coolant, and the only way to do this is via water. And what's going to end up happening is all the water's going to be soaked up. We're going to have, in quote, another hosepipe ban, whatever that, how on earth that actually does. People can't use certain parts or amounts of water, and this is the problem when something like with water companies have been heavily privatised to the point where, thanks Margaret Thatcher. And this is why all these water companies can charge you whatever you want, and they can impose bans on you, not just by government, but also by these water companies. And I think what's going to happen is one summer, they're going to say have it's another hosepipe ban, and have all these AI data centers open. And you sort of see that where all of this comes into fruition of what's going to happen in the future with a surveillance state, maybe something like with China, and also to open digital ID, and also a social credit score system. And as well, if you want to go to the link in the description, we'll links to my other channels and Discord as well.